Advanced 360 Education is a data-focused digital marketing company with proven positive outcomes for educational institutions. To learn more, visit a360education.com or call Anthony Espinoza at 310-704-5369. That's Advanced 360 Education. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe, let me try my own name again. Dr. Joe Salustio, that's me. I'm here in Orlando, Florida. Perhaps I screw up my own name because it's 97 degrees with like 127% humidity here. And Elvin Freites, my co-founder, is sitting next to me, and he keeps saying things to me, which is messing me up on the podcast. So I blame everything on Elvin. Everything bad on Elvin. Everything that's going well, I give credit to myself. That's usually the way this works around here. Anyway, we're at the Anthology Together conference here at the Swan and Dolphin Resort, Walt Disney Swan and Dolphin Resort in Orlando. And I'm lucky enough that I can pull myself away from the line that exists here to get on the EdUp Experience and interview an incredible guest. Before I bring her in, I do need to bring in my guest co-host today. You may recognize him because he was guest, I don't remember what number, but a long time ago. It feels like a long time ago, maybe a year ago or so. You'll know him because he's got a phenomenal first name, I have to say. Ladies and gentlemen, his name is Dr. Joe Bertolino, and he is the president of Southern Connecticut State University. Joe, what is up?
How you doing? Good to see you. Good to hear you, Joe. And by the way,
Joe,
if it makes you feel any better, I blame all bad things on Elvin too. So yes, that's good.
That does make me feel better. In fact, thank you for that. I was looking for confirmation that I'm doing the right thing. So we're going to have fun today, Joe, and we're going to have fun for a couple of reasons. Number one, because you and I together feels like already we can only screw up, right? Joe, how are you? Joe, how are you? That kind of thing. But somebody to keep us straight and in line is our guest today, and here she comes, ladies and gentlemen. Her name is Dr. Danielle Wilken, and she's president of the University of Bridgeport. Danielle, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me here today.
There's a lot of Joes here, Danielle, so you might have to say Joe B or Joe S if you ask either of us a question, or else we're just going to get confused, and that can happen pretty easily around here.
I think we'll be okay and muddle through.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you level set for us, Danielle? Talk about the University of Bridgeport. What do you guys do? How do you do it? And where are you located for somebody that doesn't know?
Sure. So we are located, as the name might suggest, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is on the southern shore of Connecticut. My office overlooks the beautiful Long Island Sound, and it is really one of the best locations in the state, and I would actually argue on the East Coast. We're essentially located between Boston and New York City, so lots of things to do. We educate many, many students. We have a strong engineering program. We have lots of health sciences programs. We have an education program. We have business programs, so lots of different and many other programs as well. And we offer everything from bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and doctoral degrees. Our students come from the local community and all around the world. We have a large international student population, tri-state area, and so it's a really wonderful, diverse campus.
Did you say wonderful?
Wonderful.
Oh, it is wonderful, Danielle. Thank
wonderful.
you for that lead-in. So before I pass it over to my compadre here, Joe B, for questions, I do want to ask you, and I'm going to jump right in and hit you with the hard questions, Danielle, because I know you're ready to answer them. Higher ed's in a really interesting space, and I was talking about this here live with some guests here in Anthology, and we were talking about how, it'd be really easy if we, higher ed, we have institutions and we compete against each other and their students, and that's easy to understand. And what's harder to understand is how we compete against the public perception that higher ed has somehow lost its value. And, maybe parents aren't sending their kids to college anymore, or adult students aren't choosing to go get a degree. And I use this really horrible example, metaphor of, it's not like you have a product like sneakers and you go, you know what, I'm not going to buy sneakers anymore. Nobody uses them to walk around in. We're just going to, and the sneaker companies don't have to convince you to buy sneakers. You just know you need them, right? But higher ed used to be like that, and it's not anymore. So talk to me about that. What does that look like internally with your staff, and how you believe and define the value of higher education for your students? And that's just kind of a hard thing to deal with these days.
Sure. So I do believe, obviously, I come to work every day. I do believe that higher education is an important tool for us as individuals, as well as a society, to achieve our goals. I don't believe without higher education, we can be the highest functioning society that we want to be. We are a much more technical society these days. We're a much more advanced in terms of what we need to try to do. And we need to learn those skills in higher education. So for example, we train dental hygienists. You don't want somebody who's working on your mouth who has not been appropriately trained in a higher education setting. We train physician assistants, we train engineers, we train nurses. These are all very career outcome-based majors that without the appropriate training, you're talking about individual safety, you're talking about quality of life that could really be harmed without those career specific outcomes. But equally as important is, when you think about your general education core and you think about critical thinking and you think about persistence and you think about advocacy, these are all skills that we teach in higher education. Obviously, they're being taught in K-12 to some extent, but you really practice those skills at a new level in higher education. And so, sure, there's things that you can learn on the job. But there is still incredible value to being with people with diverse opinions, to being around having your own thoughts challenged, to trying something and failing. I'm not saying you want to fail a course, but to try something in the science lab or to try something on the sports field, and to
test your grit. Test your grit, right?
We talk about persistence, we talk about self-advocacy, we talk about some of those really important life skills. If you don't have the opportunity to practice them, you're not going to be a successful adult. You're not going to be a successful practitioner in any field. And, these are critical skills that we learn typically in the higher ed setting.
Joe, what do you think about that?
Well, it's interesting. These are certainly challenging times, and as college presidents, we already know that our universities, no matter public or private, are facing very similar challenges. And I've had the pleasure and honor of serving as a college university president for the last decade, and it certainly is not the same job that it was 10 years ago, particularly in light of both COVID and in light of the fact that there has been an erosion of trust amongst the public related to in higher education. But I have two questions for you, because when we talk about all of these challenges, Bridgeport is actually in a very unique position. I'm don't know, and I'd like you to speak to whether that position helps you or is an additional challenge. Bridgeport has been through a number of transitions as a university in the last couple of years. And so I thought you might want to speak to that and how that impacts your vision for the institution, and perhaps even your day-to-day as a college president. How did you find your way to Bridgeport, if you will, particularly given all of the challenges, not just in higher education, but at your institution over the last couple of years?
Note that he did say he had 2 questions at the beginning of that 5-question series.
Yeah, thanks. I'd press a button that would make a sound for you, Joe.
There's that. So I appreciate that question, because you're right. It's almost a mini series of how I ended up at University of Bridgeport. As you mentioned, UB had experienced some economic distresses over the last number of years. And back just prior to the beginning of COVID, the UB Board of Trustees, the old UB Board of Trustees, made a pretty courageous decision to say that the economic model that was being used at UB at that time was really not sustainable. And they began to actively look for a partner for the institution. And at that time, they did speak to a number of schools in the state of Connecticut. And ultimately, they decided to partner with Goodwin University, Pear College, to a lesser extent, but primarily Goodwin University. And so Goodwin and UB entered into this partnership, and it's a significant partnership. Goodwin became, Goodwin acquired the assets of University of Bridgeport is the best way to describe it. So, there was an asset purchase of University of Bridgeport. However, it's an very unusual arrangement in higher education, because University of Bridgeport remains a separately accredited independent institution that has this formal financial relationship with Goodwin, but remains separate. And so both institutions have their own president, both institutions have their own chief financial officer, both institutions have their own chief academic officer. What is interesting is at the senior cabinet level, we do actually share a handful of cabinet members. So the vice president for HR, the vice president for facilities, the vice president for institutional effectiveness are actually shared cabinet members. And so it's the best way I would describe it as being sister institutions. There's incredible collaboration between our faculty, particularly our faculty senates of the two institutions. There's strong collaboration in the service departments. So there's partnerships, say, for example, between student affairs between the two schools. They've co-hosted career services days, and we share contracts between the two institutions. Wow. With outside vendors. And so it is an opportunity to create shared costs. It's an opportunity to share joint degrees. It's an opportunity to share experiences with each other, but remain independent of each other. And so it's a really unique arrangement, so unique that even the accreditors are still working their way through it. Because we don't fit all of the typical buckets of how an institution might partner with another institution. It's much more, it's a really interesting experience. And so how I ended up at Bridgeport was I was originally at Goodwin, I was their provost. And when the transaction was over, I was asked to serve as the president of University of Bridgeport. And I think, I had a unique background to do that in terms of this was my second merger acquisition in the last few years. I was very intimately involved with this particular transaction on the regulatory side as well as the personnel side. And it has been just such a gift in my career. It wasn't something that, university president was not something I was particularly aspiring to, especially not at this point in my life of having two teenagers. But it was a unique opportunity, and I'm incredibly grateful to be here.
That's just
Joe. I gotta interrupt you and say that I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to go back and listen again that she answered every single one of your 5 questions.
Amazing.
Okay, back over to you.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I have 5 more, which means I actually have 10.
Yikes!
In all seriousness, congratulations on your appointment. And I think the word that I would use to express what you've just described, quite frankly, is innovative. And given the changes in higher education and these times of change, I think innovation is critical. So you're trying something new. And I think that's exciting. I mean, it's scary, of course. It's at some levels, it's uncharted territory. But at the same time, I think it provides immense opportunities. I was curious, so you have one board?
No, we have two separate boards.
Two separate boards as
Two
well.
separate boards. Yep. So two separate boards of trustees, two separate board chairs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No,
That's
truly independent. Truly
fascinating.
independent.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And curious to know, because we all navigate our communities
Sure.
when change is afoot, and I'm
That was
curious.
very PC of a way to put it. I already know you were going.
I'm curious to know, Danielle,
Somebody's
how
going to ask me about change, and I'm going to say, no, I'm navigating the community.
you navigate the community. How has your faculty and staff response been to all of this media change?
Sure. So remember, we started this process during COVID, of all things. So nobody was on campus typically during the time that all of this was happening. The arrangement was announced July of 2020, and the announcement that was made turned out to be the wrong announcement, because originally it was this consortium model and there were other universities involved. They since withdrew, and it became just really Goodwin and UB. And so, as I said, at the time I was provost at Goodwin University, and Mark Steinberg, who's the president of Goodwin, and myself started hosting. We had been hosting town halls every week at Goodwin during COVID as a way of bringing the community together during this very challenging time and keeping lines of communication open. And so we transitioned that as we were moving through. There was about the UB deal between Goodwin and UB took about a year to complete. It was closer to 9 months, really, truly like having a baby. And so
just for Danielle, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I had a sound effect that says like a baby, but I didn't download it in advance. Go ahead. Sorry.
So sorry. So we, at Goodwin, we were hosting town halls every week, and we would give updates in our town halls, and we were taking questions anonymously in advance. We really wanted to bring those parking lot questions out into the open and address whatever questions and concerns Goodwin faculty and staff might have. At the same time, we were hosting town halls for University of Bridgeport using the same format. And so we would take those questions in advance. For Goodwin, it was much easier for Mark and I because we had a long history of working there. I had been there 20 years. Mark's been there 40 years. We had, established really good open relationships and good lines of communication with our faculty and staff. At UB in the beginning, it was far more challenging. They didn't know us at all. They didn't know us as an institution necessarily. They didn't know us as an individuals. Those initial town halls, I will affectionately say, were rough. They were really, really challenging. We got asked some really, not just hard questions, but just, it was rough. It was just, it wasn't collegial yet. And over time, we made an early decision that we were going to be transparent, whether we didn't have a decision, whether it was a decision that people weren't going to like. And there were a number of decisions that we had to make that people didn't like. And so we just said, we're going to speak our truth, and we're going to be honest, and we're going to be transparent. And that, we always said, you might not like the answers, but you're going to get an honest answer. And we were also really transparent when there were times where we would make an announcement in town hall. This is what we're going to close on this date. Oops, we just got a phone call from these 3 regulators, and for this reason, we have to push the date back. We know we've been telling you for 6 weeks that this is the date, but here is the honest and transparent reason why we're pushing back, and this is what we're doing, and we're giving you as much information as we can as possible. And so that was how we navigated our communities. And honestly, that's how I navigate my presidency. I continue to host a community day at the beginning of every semester, which is, I always teasingly say, it's edutainment. It's a almost like a pep rally where we talk about, this is what we're doing this semester. This is what our enrollment looks like. These are our initiatives. These are the wonderful things that people have accomplished on campus. Maybe some professional development snuck into all that. And so it's a really formal planned event. And then mid-semester, we do a town hall, which is exactly what I just described originally, which is we take the pre-submitted questions in advance, and we're really addressing not my agenda, not the cabinet agenda, but what is the community agenda? What are the questions that people have in the moment?
That's terrific. Joe, I'm going to throw it over to you because I think that this is actually the timing of what Danielle and the University of Bridgeport are engaged in is pretty significant, because everyone is talking about mergers and acquisitions of institutions these days. So
Yeah, and there's so many different kinds, right? So I'd be interested to know, because it sounds like you had some shared services. Do you have a shared services agreement between the institutions?
Yes.
So you do. So let's test my M&A knowledge. Is Goodwin is a nonprofit, right?
Correct.
Is the University of Bridgeport the sole member of that nonprofit? I think that's the way you have to structure it. Is there a sole member, two separate boards?
So there's two separate boards.
Yeah.
And Goodwin has a number of nonprofits that it manages. So Goodwin has a land trust, given where it is on the Connecticut River.
Right.
Goodwin owns and operates, and I don't mean that in a bad way, a K-12 magnet school system. So they are responsible. Goodwin is an LEA, learning education system in the state of Connecticut, the same way that like a town has a K-12 system. So UB is a part of that portfolio. Although I will say, as any accreditor, please, who might be listening, we are looking at, at that corporate structure as we speak. And there may be some adjustments to it to bring us closer into alignment with regulatory standards. We're not out of standards, but we're an unusual arrangement. And so there may be some things that students will never see, something that the public will never see, but some things that we're looking at.
Yeah, that's so important to have that conversation, because when you think about a merger and acquisition, you think about it in a for-profit for-profit context.
Right.
If I have an institution, or I have a business that makes profit, and I go and I buy another business, I become the owner of that business.
Right.
As a nonprofit institution, I don't think you can own another nonprofit institution. You have to be named I think it's called a sole member status of some kind. Anyway, it's pretty technical jargon. I have attorney friends that are going to come crush me after this episode. But anyway, the point
Notice
is,
I'm backing away from the question because I'm not.
I totally noticed that. That's why I'm like,
Exactly.
the point being that in order to operate in that space, it gives you the opportunity to have a bunch of shared services, which reduces costs for both institutions, right?
Yes.
And in that, because you're operating independently, University of Bridgeport operates independently, has its own board, has to deliver its own academics, has to deliver its own degrees. And then the federal Department of Ed comes in and says to operate independently, you have to deliver your own academics, your own faculty, but you can shared services on maybe enrollment and marketing and human resources and finance. And so you get into these really important areas where it makes a lot of financial sense to share resources, which is the point of this whole conversation, and why I just took the long way around to describe it, is because it gives institutions life. It gives them an ability to reduce expenses, share it with another institution, and serve more students at scale, right?
Yeah, and I would go beyond that. It's also you create energy and ideas that you can't create under normal conditions. So, for example, as we even before the transaction closed, we had two incredible faculty senate chairs. I mean, just wonderful human beings. They're still there. One is no longer in a faculty senate chair because she was promoted to a dean position. But the two faculty senate chairs got together, and they realized as they were having conversations that both institutions were doing all this work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they took off on their own in the best possible way and started having the faculty senates work on these initiatives together. And so they would just invite each other to each other's events, and they would have conversations around, programming. At Goodwin, we have the Goodwin Institute for Learning Innovation, which is a think tank around how do you apply universal design for learning in the higher ed space. And Goodwin has been really a national and international leader in that space. We're starting that initiative at University of Bridgeport. Goodwin has been an incredible resource for us in that space. Goodwin decided that it was time for it to look at its learning management system, and UB was already on Canvas. Goodwin decided it was going to adopt Canvas. UB has been an incredible resource for Goodwin to merge over to to canvas in a way that you can't all by yourself. Like Goodwin would have done it anyway, but you can't do it at the speed or at the scale that Goodwin is doing that right now. If you don't have a sister school that's okay, turn left here, do that there. Oh, we stubbed our toe there. Don't do that. It's happening at a speed, and there's energy in conversations that even beyond the clear dollar headcount save, there's an energy that's really amazing to watch.
Advanced 360 Education is a data-focused digital marketing company with proven positive outcomes for educational institutions. Advanced 360 Education does not simply rely on instinct to make assumptions about audiences or key data points. Rather, through data intelligence, client strategies take on a higher level of effectiveness. To learn more, visit a360education.com or call Anthony Espinoza at 310-704-5369. That's 310-704-5369. That's Anthony Espinoza at Advanced 360 Education. I love it. Joe?
Well, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what you see as the path that Bridgeport will take moving forward. I mean, if you were to have a crystal ball, as they say, and given all the work that you've done so far, where do you hope to be next year? If we had this same conversation in 12 months.
Hold on, Danielle. Let me get out your crystal ball here.
There we go.
So I think the most important thing we did in the last year was really identify who we wanted to be as an institution culturally, in terms of, we want to be a positive place for people to work. We want to be an engaging place for students to learn. We want to have a strong relationship between faculty, staff, and administration, and that we want to be open and transparent in managing, as much as I manage the community managing me, and the administration as well. I mean, it really does need to be a two-way street. And I think the most important lesson I learned as a provost was I don't have all the answers. And that it's really important that while I might have a 30,000 foot vision and be able to see things far out in advance that perhaps people who are on the day-to-day tasks can't see, my perception of what might be a small problem when you're on the ground every day is actually a much more significant problem. So we've really, thank you. We've really worked on that dynamic a lot in the last year. We've done a lot around our enrollment and admissions. And that's, obviously the lifeblood of any institution. And we're certainly looking at our retention opportunities as we move forward. I expect that I would hope UDL at Goodwin was really transformational, not just from a student learning perspective, but from a cultural perspective. One of the greatest joys I had as a provost at Goodwin was going into a faculty meeting and listening to conversations around curriculum and learning outcomes, and hearing my faculty begin every conversation, not because we told them to, but it was who they were. What is the goal of this assignment? What is the goal of this course? What is this goal of this lecture? And really built around that and worked hard at removing barriers to learning. I would like to see that. UB faculty are amazing. The UDL training, in my experience, helps faculty level up. I always refer to them as my UDL Jedi. They have these incredible skills and a mindset that sets them apart from other faculty. So I'm looking forward to bringing that to UB and seeing that impact on the classroom. I'm looking forward to starting more sports at UB. I think that's an important part of a college experience. I think for us, it's a retention and a recruitment tool. And as the mom of two teenage athletes and watching students learn persistence through those experiences, as I mentioned before, there's few times that you can learn persistence in the way that you can with that. Looking forward to adding new programs, and looking forward to revitalizing our campus a bit. We've been heavily investing in capital improvements on our campus, both visible and invisible, whether that's replacing boilers to make a building more efficient and comfortable during the winter, or putting a new roof on or reopening the pool in our recreation center, just really making the campus. And for us in Bridgeport, Bridgeport is a wonderful city, and we recognize our responsibility in the higher ed space as being an economic driver. We certainly bring people to the city of Bridgeport, and we recognize that we employ a lot of people, and so just continuing to be a big part of the city of Bridgeport and its revitalization as well.
I was curious to know, do you have collective bargaining units?
No, we, our food service, some of our outsourced services are collective bargaining, but we don't have to collective bargaining on campus. And for better or for worse, we no longer have tenure at UB. My opinion is so I have a strong opinion whether it's better or worse, but I know other people might differ from
Me
my
too. we may have differing opinions, and we'll get into that another day.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe. I see your mind burning. It's burning with questions.
I am. Hold on. The tenure issue just caught me
Did I melt your brain?
For a second, but before
I have a brain melting button.
Right. Ask that question. What athletic division conference?
We're a Division II.
Oh, you're Division II.
Yep. Which we feel is a sweet spot for us. It allows us to recruit students and to provide athletic scholarships. But we want students to be focused on their academics as well. And we know that Division I, while it's an incredible choice for some students, we don't want that to be a distraction.
Okay. And what conference are you in?
The CAC.
Got it.
And we just switched, which is why my brain melted for a moment.
Two melted presidential brains on one episode. All right. You know what time it is, guys? You probably don't. But, and I don't mean literally, Joe, even though you just looked at a clock. I mean that it's time for another episode of Higher Ed Word Association. This is the part of the episode where we play a little game, ladies and gentlemen. You may or may not, Joe, I say may not, you probably didn't know this was coming, and Danielle, you definitely didn't know.
I did
This
not.
is where I'm going to give you a word or phrase or a group of phrases related to higher education, and I want you to give me the first thoughts that come to your mind and elaborate a little bit. Don't just give me a one-word answer back, or it becomes a really short episode of Higher Ed Word Association. And of course, I'm going to start with my co-host, Dr. Joe Bertolino, to mess up so that my guest, Danielle, Dr. Danielle Wilken, succeeds. All right, here we go. Joe, you ready?
Sure.
All right. Budgets and expenses. What comes to your mind when I say those words?
Anxiety.
And why is that? Elaborate for me.
Look, I think that all institutions are struggling to navigate their financial position and their financial structures. The truth of the matter is that over the last 2 years, the federal government has provided significant assistance in helping us to navigate some challenging times. However, after this academic year, Budget 23, Budget 24 is filled with uncertainty and a lot of questions across higher education in general, regardless of what institution you are at. And so I think that uncertainty brings about a level of anxiety and concern about what our budget models should look like, and quite frankly, what our organizational structures should look like as we move forward.
Money!
Okay, Dr. Danielle Wilken, same question to you. Budgets and expenses. What comes to your mind?
Strategic plan. So Joe, I had a similar response when before you said anxiety, I thought hiding under my desk. But
Yikes!
exactly. To Joe's point, there's a limited, your dollars only go as far. I mean, those are really honest, going back to transparency, these are honest conversations we're having at UB. You can't spend more than you make. Otherwise you run a deficit, and that's a really dangerous place to be running an organization from. So you have to prioritize how you're going to spend your money and what buckets it's going to go into. And so I know for us, we're in the process of writing our strategic plan, and that is a conversation. When you're asking for additional money, how does it fit into the strategic plan? How does it serve our students? How does it benefit our faculty and staff? If you can't answer those questions, that item's not going to get budgeted for, because there's no magic money tree. And so you need to be really responsible with how you spend those dollars, and make sure that at the end of the day, you're doing something that improves the quality of life on campus. And there's lots of ways that quality of life can be defined, but it had better serve your students and your community. Otherwise, it's frankly, it's fiscal mismanagement.
All right. So you got the hang of it, both of you now. So Danielle, I come to you for this one. You go first. Your next one is future learning models.
You're right in my sweet spot.
That's why I'm letting you go first, because me and Joe are going to have to learn from you here.
So, I mean, for me, I've been in the space of working with UDL, Universal Design for Learning, for probably 10 years. I jokingly say I was the worst doctoral student ever to live, but my dissertation I use every day. I truly believe that we need to look at we need to look at the educational model in this country. The educational model in this country is built from the Industrial Revolution and widgets. And so, we line students up in classrooms in rows and it looks like a factory. And that's not how the brain works. It's not how students learn. And so we really need to think about, how do we remove barriers to learning? How do we make learning inclusive? And diversity there's lots of different types of diversity. Is it our veteran students? Is it our older students? Is it our GED students? Is it our English language learner students? For me, UDL was a really good solution to that challenge. And the faculty really embraced it. And we've seen really good outcomes on that. I think it's in large part, what does the relationship between faculty and students looks like? And what does curriculum look like? What do assessments look like? The model of, we're going to test every student to the nth degree, and that's how we're going to graduate them, is a failed model. And the sooner we step away from that, the sooner we can serve a much more diverse population. And really, I still believe in the American dream of higher education is a way of achieving social equity. And so when we can bring students who were at the fringes into higher education, I think that's an incredible gift, not only to those students, but to society.
Future learning models to you, Joe, after that.
What she
Sorry?
said. What she said. I don't know if I have much more to add to that, but look, the key words that stick out for me are access and flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple. I mean, we know that the academy moves very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, despite our best efforts in communicating urgency, I don't think that we have the time. The clock has run out on our ability to move slowly and take our time. That just isn't going to. That just isn't something that makes sense. And I have been saying, perhaps in the last few years, if we do not make certain decisions, and if we don't move the needle and do so quickly, someone's going to do it for us. Mm-hmm. Someone's going to make those decisions for us. And so, again, focusing on access, focusing on flexibility, and quite frankly, focusing on workforce development. I know faculty cringe when they hear that, but when our students and their families walk in the door, they want to know, one, is my student going to have a good experience? 2, is my student going to be safe? 3, is my student going to walk out of here a better individual who is educated and has skills to navigate and pivot a variety of different skill sets? And four, is my student going to be employed? Yeah, please, I want my son to move out of my basement.
No sound effect for that. You know what? And I agree with both of you. And I was actually I gave a talk about this the other day, and we were talking about educational parity. And quality, by and large, institution to institution is pretty. I'm going to say even, but there's educational quality in many, many institutions, and how speed is becoming more of a differentiator for institutions. Being able to move quickly to serve more students. Can can the institution take the disruptive nature of COVID and continue that mindset? Or do we just kind of go, okay, it's over, and we'll go back to the way things were? All right, here we go. Last one. Joe, you go first. Something you would tell yourself today, something that you wish you knew 2 years ago. Wait, how do I ask that? You know what I'm saying, right? If I only knew then what I know now, what's the presidential tip you give to current, future, aspiring presidents?
Well, there are three things that come to mind. The first is be authentic. You have to be your authentic self in order to be successful, flaws and all. Mm-hmm. I think that in the current environment, in any environment for that matter, not just the current environment, people see through the nonsense. They
much more street smart, if that was it, but there's a nonsense radar for sure.
Yeah, and so I think authenticity matters. I think that particularly given the climate that we see throughout the country and the world, for that matter, I'm a big fan of Carol Gilligan's ethic of care. And I do think that we have a responsibility as presidents to lead through an ethic of care. Not just about caring about our students, but we need to care about our students. We need to care about the members, all the members of our community, our personnel, and we need to care for the members of our community in the communities in which we reside. So I think that ethic of care becomes pretty critical. And the last two things I'll say is I am a product of Jesuit education, and I learned the Ignatian tradition of cura personalis, and that is care for the whole person. We are educating our students in every way, not just in a discipline. And so understanding that concept, I think, is pretty critical. And finally, you need to be patient and you need to be persistent. Patience and persistence is the order of the day. Even when you don't have time to be patient, you still have to be persistent. So those are my immediate thoughts.
All right, Danielle, if I only knew then what I know now, what are your presidential tips and advice for future aspiring, current, future, I said future already, presidents or administrators?
So I am just finishing my first year as a president. And it has been an incredible learning curve. So, unlike Joe's 10 years, I don't have yet. But I would just say,
not many do. He's been around for a really long time.
Back to Joe's comment about being authentic, no one will be as critical of you as you. So, take a breath. I think, and you're absolutely right. If you're not authentic, you're dead in the water. You'll never, you have to be authentic to lead. And I think it all goes back to just good leadership and, acknowledging what you don't know. And it is a learning curve. Surround yourself with good people. You asked this question about budget earlier, and that for me is a learning curve. And I'm really fortunate to have an excellent experienced CFO who is, willing to sit with me and go through and teach me things that I didn't know before. And listen more than you talk. Listen to your students, listen to your faculty and staff, listen to your community, and try to not always be the first person to speak. I think one of the big things is as a president or in a leadership role, your voice is going to carry more weight no matter what. So let others speak first so that you can actually hear the ideas before you shut them down. Because
that's a great leadership lesson in general. I love that. That's a huge takeaway from this episode. Listen to others. Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, I was not listening. I was speaking. I've already failed. And Danielle, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'll just add to that relationships matter.
Oh, God, yeah.
That is what we do as presidents. We help to build relationships and build community. And we even have to end relationships or change relationships or bridge relationships. Relationships matter in every context.
Love that. All right, Danielle, here's your final two questions of the episode. Number one, what did we not say about the University of Bridgeport that you would like to say? Anything that we didn't cover, you were hoping we would say, events you're speaking at, things going on the website, I'm giving you ideas, anything about the University of Bridgeport you want to say. And secondarily to that, what do you see, Danielle, as the future of higher education?
With University of Bridgeport, I would just say, everybody come and visit. It is an incredible place to be. There's, just endless energy and excitement on campus. And we would love to have anybody who wants to come and visit us. And the future of higher education, I do think we're going to see more of the Goodwin UB kind of relationships where schools partner with each other. I think, the idea that schools are all going to outcompete each other. The cannibalistic model is not working. And so we all need to find ways to partner with each other in service to our students.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an incredible episode of the EdUp Experience. I first want to thank my guest co-host. He is a man like no other here. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Joe Bertolino. He's president of the Southern Connecticut State University.
Yeah.
Joe, thanks for coming on to co-host with me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And ladies and gentlemen, of course, our esteemed guest today. She's entering now what will be her second year as the university president. We wish her all the best of luck. We got a lot of great advice from her. She is absolute
fire.
Ladies and gentlemen, she's Dr. Danielle Wilken, president of the University of Bridgeport. Danielle, thank you for coming on the EdUp Experience. Did you have a good EdUp experience today?
I had a great experience. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Effective marketing for educational institutions requires a dedicated partner that understands the complex, constantly evolving digital landscape in which colleges, universities, and career schools compete. The EdUp Experience podcast partner, Advanced 360 Education, is a data-focused digital marketing company with proven positive outcomes for educational institutions. Advanced 360 Education does not simply rely on instinct to make assumptions about audiences or key data points. Through data intelligence, client strategies take on a higher level of effectiveness, whether the goal is driving enrollment, alumni engagement, or other educational marketing campaigns. To learn more, visit a360education.com or call Anthony Espinoza at 310-704-5369. That's Anthony Espinoza, 310-704-5369, a360education.com.